Hello everyone, Snickety here. A while back I said I wanted to look at some more visual novels, and that's exactly what we're doing in this video. Well, if that clumsy game librarian ever actually finds them for me. Last time I checked, she was stuck underneath a pile of Sega CD games. She almost died. In the meantime, let's talk about the genre itself. Visual novels are quite unlike regular video games, to a point where it's debated whether they can be considered video games at all. They run on the same systems as video games, such as console and PC, but they don't adhere to the traditions of video games. There's usually no interactivity to speak of outside of a click of a mouse to advance text, or to make a choice that could change the narrative. They're basically electronic versions of those choose-your-own-adventure books, but they have artwork, music, sound effects, and voice acting. Actually, they don't necessarily have to have any of those things, as was the case with Flanker, a visual novel I looked at in another video. They're a strange mix of mediums: books, animation, and, of course, video games. Some visual novels are branching narratives which require a flowchart to see every route and ending, while others are linear paths with little to no deviation. The latter are known as kinetic novels, and they're what we're going to be looking at in this video. There's also the more mainstream variant which actually does include traditional gameplay, such as the Zero Escape and Phoenix Wright series, but we'll leave those for another day. It's a genre that came about due to financial restrictions more than anything. Text and static images are obviously much more inexpensive than fully animated graphics. Even so, there is charm to be found in its simplicity. A visual novel can evoke a minimalistic aesthetic that is quite unlike anything else. It has a lot of potential for atmosphere, and encourages the player to use their imagination. Like comics, movies, and other types of video games, there's an established language to the visual novel that you often don't think about. For example, what's the deal with characters talking to each other while standing side by side and looking directly at the player? It makes no sense in the real world, but we've come to accept it as normalcy within its generic conventions. Don't scare me like that, Sachi. Now where was I? Oh yeah. There are many different types of visual novels, and today we're going to be taking a look at 6 different ones, all of which are shorter than 2 hours, because I got shit to do, you know? I can't tell if you're sassing me or asking a genuine question. Either way, the answer is no. First up is Over the Rainbow, the story of a doctor and his relationship to a 19-year-old girl with the mind of a 7-year-old. She has some undefined illness that leaves her bedridden and close to death. Ah, the old dying cute anime girl trope. A little cliche, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't get me every time. The doctor puts her under hypnosis and takes her to locations she can never actually visit herself, such as the seaside and mountains. He also reverts her back to when she was a baby, and has her experience what it would have been like if she had lived as a normal girl. Going to school, falling in love with a boy, and finally gaining the courage to confess to him. It's all very sweet. But then it gets creepy. He makes her believe that the boy she's in love with is him. And then they start banging. Yeah, I forgot to mention that a lot of visual novels have porn. Not all of them, of course, but a great deal do. It can sometimes be really superfluous and out of place, almost to a point where you can remove them and not change the story at all, which is the case with most of Type Moon's games. But there are also the ones where the sex scenes do actually tie into the plot in interesting ways, which is the case with Over the Rainbow. Oh geez, apparently the Doctor is Slender Man. But let's continue. Their little fantasy continues with the Doctor proposing to her. Yeah, this is creepy because she has the mind of a 7-year-old. But then again, he did simulate a normal life beforehand. And she is physically 19, so I don't know. What do you think, Sachi? Creepy or not? I agree, she's probably never seen a man's body this tough before. Other than the martial arts contests Miku's watched on television, that is. God damn, I'm a sexy buff bastard. Yeah, I added that last part. So after finishing, he leaves Miku and we find out the extent of the Doctor's super hypnosis powers. He hypnotized 2 of the nurses so they wouldn't interrupt him, by making them have sex with each other. Was that really necessary? I mean, I get that he loves Miku, but I'm starting to think that this Doctor is just a pervert. So at this point he starts speaking to an acquaintance, who read all about his exploits from a letter that he sent her. Here we learn quite a few interesting details, such as how Miku's parents are now deceased, unbeknownst to her, and that the Doctor himself is a widower. The Doctor says that Miku actually loved him and he wanted them to get married legitimately. I find this part particularly interesting because we never see any proof of this in the story. This could have been done intentionally to make the Doctor seem creepier. but it really does just come off as bad writing. At any rate, this is where my favourite line in the game comes in. His acquaintance tells him to seize happiness with Miku while she's still alive, and his response is surprisingly realistic. You're wrong, I just raped a retarded woman. Wow, that he did. This is the part of the game that I found quite unique. A lot of the time these hentai visual novels try to justify their forbidden romance in some way, usually by having a really stupid and unrealistic happy ending. Not this one though. It seems somewhat aware of how messed up the Doctor's actions are. The funny thing is, he may have fucked her to death because she dies from fatigue shortly after, but she at last got to experience pleasure. I'm pretty sure I remember this exact storyline from the Lady Snowblood manga. On her deathbed she calls him father, implying that she never really loved him in the same way as he did. And then she asks if they can find Over the Rainbow together, possibly in the next life. The song was used by the Doctor to hypnotise Miku earlier in the game, and is made out to be a special song between the two of them. My complaint about this is that this is a game named Over the Rainbow, with the song being an important part of the story, but it never actually plays Over the Rainbow. Okay, I know this is a small visual novel, with hentai scenes, so it probably would have a hard time getting the rights to such a famous and beloved song, but god damn it, if you tease Over the Rainbow, you better play the damn song at some point. The ending to this game is really weird, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but is touching in a serene way. It doesn't have a happy ending really, but it has a bittersweet ending, confusing me even further whether this game has any self-awareness about its creepiness. This one's not too bad, just a little messy. It's the tale of a man's strange obsession over a girl with the mind of a child. It's kind of creepy, but in a fascinating way, and it's very well made. The artwork is nice, and the music, despite not including Over the Rainbow, is surprisingly good, especially the ending song. Anyway, moving on to the... Are you singing Over the Rainbow? Stop that! You want to get me sued? Anyway, moving on to the next visual novel. This one is called Red Witch. It's a very short tale of a red-headed witch who lives alone in the mountains with her friend, the Red Lion, who only she can speak to. The two of them are hated by the villagers until one day the girl is taken in by them as thanks for healing an injured child. She becomes the village's doctor and is beloved, but the Red Lion is now without his friend. He of course desires the same kind of acceptance by the villagers as the witch. It's about 10 minutes long and reads like an old lost folk tale. It's a story with a very important message. Don't let your fear make you demonize those you do not understand. It's timeless and well worth a read. The visuals are all in this nice, minimalistic style, except for the title screen after you finish it. This is done in a more traditional anime style. Looks like a yandere smug Wendy. Next game please, Sachiko. Next we have 40 Days and 40 Nights of Rain, a visual novel that is absolutely dripping with melancholy. There's very little hope to be found in its war-stricken setting. The story takes place during a brief truce and follows Yu, a soldier given the nickname Tinplate because of his emotionless demeanour. There's a very good reason for this, however, as his family were casualties of the war, a horrifying scene his mind goes to whenever he dreams. Yu no longer has any reason to survive, essentially. His heart stopped beating long ago. This changes when he meets the little girl Kairi, who seems to be a little too pure for this world. Slowly, the two begin to build a sweet relationship, and the Tinplate soldier's heart begins to soften again. The two stay at an inn, which is the setting for much of the story. It puts a lot of focus on the other soldiers staying in the inn, and how they're good people struggling in a bad world. It's careful to never give us any details of the war. We don't know what it's motivated by or even who it's between. It could be any conflict in human history really. It's simply not important to the narrative. What is important is what it does to these characters, and how it paints humanity as a whole. It's a story about finding beauty in a horrible, dead world. Each character is finding meaning and a reason to exist in spite of their circumstances. Even Kairi, who realises that there's good in the world a little too late. I won't spoil the twist ending, but it's very emotional and it fits the tone perfectly, if a little cliche. There really is a lot to love here. It's all very dreamlike, especially with this music that could probably put you to sleep, it's that peaceful. If I have any complaints, it's that it would have been nice to have some more character portraits on screen. It's unclear who's speaking at times. We never get a look at some of the side characters, so they feel somewhat detached from the story, and they don't make a big impact. And as much as I like the music, it can get very repetitive. 40 Days and 40 Nights of Rain is definitely a somber story. It may not be up everyone's alley, but I really recommend it, if you want to depress yourself. In a way, the world in the story is a reflection of the Tinplate soldier. It continues to exist in spite of having died long ago. Even so, there is beauty and meaning to be found. I liked it. But that's not all. There was another side story in this series titled A Happy Valentine. It's basically more of Timplay and Kyrie interacting. A little bit more of that surrogate father and daughter relationship. The plot is she makes him some chocolates for Valentine's Day. It's not really necessary. There's nothing in it that isn't already present in the main story. I would say only bother with this if you're a huge fan of the main game. My, it's gotten a little creepy in the game library, hasn't it? That's because these last couple games are particularly horrifying. Tales that you might want to play late at night, possibly when you're home alone. Submitted for your approval. A gothic tale of... What the hell is this? Sachi, that's not the right game! What even is this? John Cena's sexy high school What? No! You've ruined the mood, Sachi. I had this spooky introduction and everything. Be a dear and start the correct game, please. And dispose of this thing. Okay, so this is Ballad of an Evening Butterfly. A gothic tale of romance, mystery and horror. It follows a boy with amnesia named Kaoru Sera, who happens upon an old western-style mansion in a remote location. He meets a creepy kid named Yoru who, curiously, already knows his name. The boy introduces him to his albino sister locked in the basement named Cho. He's meant to be a sacrifice to her, but he ends up becoming her playmate instead. And the two form a kind of cute bond. There's a butterfly motif going on in this story. Cho translates to butterfly, and butterflies are these ever-present creatures within the mansion. Both Yoru and Cho have control over their own set of butterflies, one type being white and the other being black. I think you can guess which one belongs to which. They're extremely deadly and can tear a person apart at any time, something we see when a burglar breaks into the mansion and pulls the gun on Yoru. Yeah, you don't want to mess with the butterflies. They're called Yacho, and they're thought to be the spirits of the dead. The game opens with an explanation of what butterflies are, just in case you didn't know. This kinda reminds me of the opening of another game, actually. But anyway, the users of the Yacho are the Mitsuki family, and they're vampire-like creatures that are weak to the sun. The story mainly focuses on Kaoru's forbidden romance with Cho. As you may have guessed from that amnesia part I mentioned earlier, this game is absolutely filled with plot twists, one of which is that our protagonist Kaoru turns out to be... brace yourself, a woman! Wait a minute. So what? This is such a superfluous plot twist that I don't feel bad about spoiling it at all. Yes, Kaoru is a woman, but it changes literally nothing. Well, it does mean her romance with Cho is homosexual, but so what? It adds nothing extra to the narrative. You'd expect it to, but it doesn't. It's just there because they thought it would be a shocking reveal, which it wasn't. I could not tell you what was going on in the last act of this story. It's convoluted, characters behave in confusing ways, and it throws too much of its mythology at you all at once. To illustrate how insane this is, I'll give you the details that are revealed towards the end. This is all within the space of about 5 minutes, mind you. Okay, so Yoru explains that the Chozuki, the race that both he and his twin sister Cho are a part of, don't have any male-female distinction. In fact, it was only because he was raised as a man while Cho was raised as a woman that they have any semblance of gender at all. He also explains that the only way they can reproduce is if a contract is formed. This changes them from asexual to bisexual. Cho, Sera and Yoru all have the same birthmark indicating a contract. As I've already mentioned, Sera turns out to be a woman. Yoru explains that even if Cho was able to have sex with Sera, which she can't because she doesn't have sex organs, her soul is now female from being raised as a woman, so she probably won't want to anymore. This is in spite of the fact that he said the Chozuki become bisexual when in a contract just moments ago. He further explains it's because Sera is a woman that she loves Cho. She's somehow looking for a lost part of herself, or some nonsense like that. But then Yoru explains that the reason Sera was estranged from her former reality, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, is because of her prior confusion over her gender. It's because of this that Sera lost all of her memories and was chosen as a mate for Cho. But wait, there's more! Yoru then kisses Sera and says that even he will do, implying a very tenuous connection between her and Cho, like it's all an illusion brought on by the contract, the imprinting of love. He explains that bearing a child with a contract has become taboo in the Mitsuki family because of birth deformities. He also says that if by any chance a contract bearer is born not of the Mitsuki family, they must be immediately killed. Wait, so is Sera just some random person born with this contract thing or what? Then how does Yoru know about her weird gender confusion? And how did the two even meet? Was it just a coincidence? But then, immediately after, he says that if Sera is determined to love Cho, the Mitsuki family welcomes her. What? If their love isn't real and is brought on by this contract thing, wouldn't that be the case with any of them? Why is this suddenly a love conquers all story? And then Yoru gets an axe in the back, which would have been my reaction at this point. And then he tried to escape, but alas, a single butterfly kills Sera, and Cho is shot in the head by Yoru. The end. What is this insanity? What was the point of any of this? What is anything in this story at all? This is just bad, overly complicated storytelling. It's a real shame this devolves into nonsense because the first half is beautifully atmospheric and intriguing. It's not all terrible. The music is very good and the monochromatic visuals are pretty cool. A spooky mansion as a setting, what's not to love? Must resist the urge to make a monster's reference. Damn it! If I had any problems with the sound, it's these gunshots. Yeah, that doesn't sound right at all, does it? Sounds like a car door being shot on the other side of the road. Though the mix between anime characters and real photography doesn't work very well here. There's usually no filters over the images, so they just look out of place, especially when adjacent to the drawn backgrounds. The translators clearly had a hard time with this, as every now and then you'll get a paragraph explaining something that couldn't be translated into English. It's a little jarring. A lot of this game's story relies on parts of the Japanese language though, so I do understand why they did this. I like how in the version I downloaded you get this screen after the end credits. It kinda breaks the mood. Anyway, if you couldn't tell, I'm not a huge fan of this one. It overwhelms you with a bunch of different yet similar sounding terms, many of which have the word show in there somewhere. I'd give it a 2-star rating, but we don't give numerical ratings on the SnicketySlice channel. Also, it's a video, so it would be pretty pointless after you just listened to me ramble about it for 5 minutes. So, final thoughts?
It stinks!
Sachi, next game please. Sachi? Where'd she go? Oh, I get it. She fled in terror from the last game we'll be taking a look at in this video. Phenomenal. I know, that's not a typo. I saved this one for last because it's awesome. This is probably the highest budget of the short visual novels we've taken a look at so far. It was developed by Nitro Plus, a name to remember if you're just getting into visual novels. They developed many of my favourites, including the critically acclaimed Steins Gate. Because of this, the quality is a lot higher than the other games in this video. There's also some pretty big talent involved in its creation. Its character designs were done by Abe Yoshitoshi, of Serial Experiments Lane fame, and another lesser known series I'm quite fond of, Technolize. I'm a huge fan of his character designs and use of colour. A good way to describe it is beautifully bleak. It lends itself perfectly to the horror genre. Not only this, but it was also directed by Nitro Plus regular Ogami Keiichi. Phenomenal was released for free to promote a light novel series, which has not been translated into English, much to my chagrin. It follows a man named Nagito, who, having just moved to Tokyo for university, rents an old cheap house known as the House That Grants Wishes. During his stay, he begins to hear creaking noises and other unexplained phenomena. One night he's shocked to find the number 7 engraved in his wall, and then, a few days apart, the numbers 6 and 5. He seeks help at an offline meeting between the members of a ghost investigation website, and we also hear about a mysterious figure known as Yoichi, who seems to be posting on the site non-stop. On his way home, Nagito finds something disturbing engraved on the bottom of his sneaker. The countdown continues, and Nagito returns to the offline meeting seeking help. He runs into the eccentric Yoichi, and the two begin an investigation into the house and its apparent haunting. It might sound predictable, but there are a lot of original ideas here. It goes into a lot of detail about Japanese architecture. It sounds kinda boring, but trust me, it ties into the whole haunted house plot perfectly. No joke, this really reminded me of my own feelings of isolation when I had moved for university. It's a feeling many people in this day and age can relate to, I'm sure. Being in a place filled with people, yet feeling completely and utterly alone. Throw in the paranoia of ghosts and not being able to tell anyone without getting crazy looks, and you have yourself a pretty scary story. It's kept ambiguous whether the house is really haunted at all. Nothing too crazy actually happens in the story. You don't get any outlandish poltergeist antics, just things you yourself might relate to. A strange sound at night, or a brief glimpse of a human figure in your peripheral vision. Just like with the supernatural in real life, you never get a definitive answer, just an unnerving feeling that keeps you pondering it long afterwards. It's not a story about finding a ghost in your house and trying to survive. It's more about trying to find out if there is a ghost at all, and whether or not your real enemy is your own imagination. Phenomenal is all about the fear of the unknown. A running idea in the story is that you shouldn't delve into things you do not understand. It's Lovecraftian in that way. The other side, the world of the paranormal, is not something you stare into without being driven a little mad. We see this with the character Yoichi, who is something of an enigma, and may not be playing with a full deck of cards, She's what our protagonist Nagito could become if he gives into his curiosity. Like Nagito, we too are being drawn into a mystery we can't look away from, against our own better judgment. The direction is fantastic. If you played Sayano Uta, you'll recognise these mad, off-putting visuals. They make great use of unnatural colours to give you an uneasy feeling. The backgrounds are photographs under heavy filters, as they often are in visual novels. But unlike our previous game, it never feels out of place among the anime art. As much as I love the character designs and visuals in this game, the real star of the show is the sound. It can be downright oppressive at times, and I mean that in a good way. It's used very effectively to build suspense, and when it hits you with a jump scare, it's well deserved. It's an awesome story with interesting characters, great artwork and sound design. It all comes together to create something special. It's a great example of what you can do with the visual novel genre. It's what I play these things for. I mentioned earlier that this was released to promote a line of books, so there is room left for more stories. But the one told here is pretty self-contained. You won't be left feeling like you only got half a story. Hey Sachi, you can come out now. I'm not playing Phenomeno anymore. Ha! I totally got her. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of a genre I love. I also hope you'll be enticed to check some of these out. I will be leaving some details in the description of where you can download them for free. Legally, of course, as none of these were released commercially. There's so many games in the game library, yet so little time. Later.